Hi, everyone, and welcome to the technically challenged version of the 4D user group called 4D Method. Today is March 13th. Actually, I think that's wrong. Let me check my phone. As I mentioned, this is going to be a fun one. This is meeting number 70. On our agenda today, we're going to, as usual, just review what's going on, what 4D Method is all about, talk about some of our upcoming user group presentations. We'll hear what's been happening in the happy hour, the 4D happy hour with Kirk Brooks. We'll get some 4D news from Jim Sobczak, talk about some of the recent blog articles in the 4D blog. And as well, we'll highlight one of the recent tech notes that came out in the knowledge base, the 4D knowledge base. All of these things are great resources for 4D developers and users. And we'll have our usual special topic presentation, ULO, user listing with ORDA, online this time around. J. Douglas Cryer, Dougie, will show off his core application component, or just the core of his application that he's able to integrate some of the basic web application features for his customers that he was able to use, do the same with his ULO component. Anyways, more on that later. My name is Brent Raymond. I'm still trying to figure out how to run these meetings successfully. So thanks for your patience. Sometimes I should just do these every week. That way I'll remember what the setup is. But I organize the 4D Method 4D user group. The website is 4dmethod.com, and I can be reached at 4dmethod@gmail.com. I'm a longtime 4D developer. I love talking about 4D development, 4D applications. I'm always interested in what other people are doing with their 4D development, as well as Codely, as we're starting to see more and more of that in our environments. And that's what led me to start organizing this years and years and years ago. And the goal here is just to bring together the community of users and developers in the 4D world, all around the world, for them to do things like share new programming techniques, see what 4D is doing out there in the world. I'm always surprised, and always intrigued at what role these applications are playing in so many different industries. This is also a great place to find 4D development support. These meetings have some of the highest talent, the best talent in the 4D world. It's you guys in the user group. So this is the place to find help for all the customers out there. And just to see, hey, what can be done with 4D? We've all got different ideas, different needs, different requirements, specifications, different businesses, and it's just always interesting to see what's possible. Oftentimes, hardly run into a problem that can't be solved with the environment. So this is your 4D support community in general, and please take part in the user group meetings and reach out and show off some of the things that you're doing and what you need for your businesses, and also be a presenter. This is your group to show off everything you're doing, or just you don't have to show off everything, maybe just a little something that you can share. In a couple of our upcoming meetings this year, we've got Milan Adamov showing off some of the what is entitled here, Master Action Building with GitHub. It's pretty cool. He's been able to automate a pretty complicated process for creating built servers, clients, and standalone applications, working with Tiran, Beruz, and Clearview systems. So it'll be really neat to see some of the strategies and how he's overcome certain challenges with doing a daily build for this kind of complicated environment. And then we'll have Thomas Schlumberger join us. Of course, I'm probably using the incorrect German pronunciation of that, but he'll be joining us from the Alsace region of France to talk about his 4D info report component, which has recently undergone a bit of an overhaul, modernizing the core of the code. The 4D info report component, we've talked about that several years ago in a previous 4D method presentation, and it's always very useful for keeping track of what's going on with the memory of your application, and trying to sort out what's happening behind the scenes with 4D running on site and installations, and seeing what the behavior is with the memory and users and whatnot. So you can check out the 4dmethod.com schedule at 4dmethod.com/schedule. We do have open dates for this year, later in the year, August 14th, October 2nd, November 20th. Or you can always just record a quick demo to share on the website, or just a link to your YouTube. I think it's a great way to not only show off what you're doing, but just to just to share a little bit with the community, so we all know a little bit more about what you're up to. And it's a great way to get attention for your skills and your components and products and plugins and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in presenting on any of these dates, please reach out to me, and we will get something worked out. So okay, moving on along, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Rick Hazy. Speaking of doing a presentation to the user group, I had the pleasure of hanging out with Rick Hazy at the Art Institute Museum in Chicago last week. Rick Hazy is from Louisiana and since made Michigan his home, and he has had a long career in the world of tech and programming. Here he is at Funk's Barber Shop in Chicago, seemingly getting funky. Rick gave a great presentation on a component he wrote for handling JSON in 4D. That was 4D method meeting number 1. So since we're all working natively with JSON and objects in 4D, but back then he was really turning a corner, providing some great useful functionality in the 4D development environment that wasn't already native. So he's since retired from the wonderful world of 4D development, but he will always be number 1 at 4D Method. So good to see you, Rick, and thanks for coming to visit.
Oh, hey, Brent, I've since retired from everything, not just 4D. And I want to give a shout out to Brent too, because I kind of went on walkabout and ended up in Chicago and said, hey, you want to get together? And he gave me a tour of the museum. He bought me lunch. Now, I don't know if he'll buy everybody lunch who shows up, but I appreciated it. I don't want to put you on the hook, Brent.
Yeah, don't advertise that. Yeah, that's
And
not guaranteed.
yeah, and he showed me some of the great code and work he's done at the Art Institute of Chicago. And if the Art Institute is not a showcase for 4D, they ought to be. So anyway, thanks for that, Brent. Appreciate it.
Well, appreciate the compliments, and great to see you, Rick.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so and then I'm going to kick it over to Kirk to to talk about the 4D Happy Hour. It happens each week, and I'll let him fill in a little bit more of the details. But yeah, so you go, Kirk.
Thanks, Brent. Well, I was just sitting here looking at the people in the meeting, and I mean, at least half the room has, been to 4D Happy Hour at least once, and a whole bunch of folks here are there pretty regularly. So, for the folks who haven't been to 4D Happy Hour, I get it. It's a weird time because we're North Americans, and we think that the world actually centers over here. There's nothing else I can do about that, I'm afraid. It is 3:30 Pacific time every Friday. And much like the purpose of 4D Method here, my idea was to have a forum where we could get together and we could talk about 4D stuff. We can play with code. One of the great things that we get to do at 4D Happy Hour that you can't always do in a lot of larger meetings like this, or structured meetings, is just share some screens and try stuff and look at various things, and just really kind of nerd out on talking about something that's working, something that's not working. A few weeks ago, we had a really interesting deep dive into looking at the data class extended data class functions, and just a really informative time of just trying some stuff in a client server environment and looking at the different ways that those functions interact with an entity, depending on whether you're calling it from a form, whether you're calling it locally, whether you're doing it on the server, how does execute on server impact on those things. It was very instructive. I mean, I think all of us there learned a lot from it, and that's one of the great things that we're able to do at Happy Hour, and that's one of the reasons I invite everybody to stop by sometime. Just come by, say hello, visit with folks, talk about things that you're interested in, and bring something interesting to look at or something you want to show off. So that's what I got. And Brent, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to keep it in front of mind for everybody as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great, I mean, it always takes a lot of effort to organize those kind of things, and I think it's something that's become very special, a great opportunity for people to very casually pop in and chat, and like you said, play with code, and in a very friendly environment. And it's far less structured than these meetings, and so I think it's got a lot to offer. So thanks for coming up with that, and we'll continue to talk about it as long as you will. All right, so thanks. Let's see, we'll kick it over now to Jim Sobczak to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the 4D world, 4D corporate and trainings and releases and all the perhaps we'll find out some inside information about the road show for this year. I don't know, we'll see.
You will not find that out today, though.
No.
But I can fill you in on the other stuff. And yeah, I want to I totally agree with Rick. I've been fortunate enough to visit the Art Institute of Chicago and see the application, get a great demo of the application, and Brent was just a really gracious host, and just enjoyed that so much. So great memories about that visit. We'll have to do that again soon. So yes. So hello to everyone here in the US and Canada, and to members of the 4D community all over the world. I say it that way because our marketing team is making a concerted effort now to inform more developers outside of North America about these meetings, the 4D Method meetings, including sending out announcements about 4D Method to folks in the UK and parts of Europe. We think the information presented here is super important, And Brent is just such a valuable member of the 4D community and everybody on this call, actually. So we want to get this information disseminated and show people what the 4D community is all about. So we're hoping that those marketing efforts will bear fruit and will expand the reach of these meetings. So thank you, Brent, for organizing these, and congratulations on number 70.
Yeah.
So that's
Getting
awesome.
up there. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. And we're looking forward to Dougie's presentation on the next generation of user listing with ORDA. I remember this previous presentation earlier this year or last year. Really interesting, and I'm sure this will be equally as informative. So, excuse me. So hopefully you're all following the blog post on V20 4D20 R4, no V anymore, which is currently in the late beta stages. We're close to releasing 4D20 R4. And we're just super excited that so many of our customers, large customers, small customers, vertical market developers, along with many of you on this call, are taking advantage of feature releases. You know, it's a great way to have access to new features in 4D without having to wait for the next LTS release, which in this case will be 4D21 LTS. So if you're not using feature releases, you need to wait until 4D21 is released to take advantage of everything that's out there. So, but you'll have a good head start knowing what is out there, and you can test it if you're not able to deploy it. So we're really happy about the blog posts that are out there now. Soon, when R4 is released, we'll do another feature release webinar about that. Should be interesting. And in addition, many blog posts about Codely for 4D. And we're getting a lot more interest in Codely 4D since the summit and since all the blog posts explaining what it is on the forum, 4D forums. And while we're speaking about LTS versions, just a reminder that we'll be saying goodbye to 4D19 on July 12th this year. We'll stop sales and support of 4D19. So hopefully everyone is either already on 4D20 or planning to be on 4D20 by that time. So once you're on 4D20, you'll have until July of 2026, because that one will be out there and supported that long. But 19 is going away, not too far, about 4 months from now. So, okay, and reminder about training. Just a reminder that the on-demand training in our store now has all the Summit Master classes available. So if you were unable to attend the Summit for any reason, you will have access to the on-demand training classes that are in the store. So you just go to store.4d.com, click on the on-demand button, and then you'll have access to those master classes, as well as a plethora of other training opportunities there. So if you haven't seen that, please just take a gander and see if anything there appeals to you, including training on Codely. And then my last point is about marketing campaigns. I know we're doing a lot of marketing now. We have a really outstanding marketing team, global marketing team in France and in the US that is putting out a lot of marketing material, specifically about campaigns that we're doing for professional services for you guys as developers. I think the most recent one was the free V20 conversion campaign. So what that is if you're on an older version of 4D, running an older version of 4D, you can fill out the survey, and then our team will get back to you with the opportunity to do a free 4D20 conversion report. And what that is an analysis of what it'll take you to move your application to 4D20, right? So it'll talk about all your methods, plugins, etc. So we take receipt of your source code, take a look at it, come back to you with a report on what needs to be done to move to the latest and greatest version of 4D20. So that is really gaining a foothold with developers all over the world. In fact, we started these campaigns in the US with Ricardo Mello, was mostly the VP of Inside Sales. He's mostly the person that started all of those campaigns like that. and now they're being done all over the world. And so it's great for us to hear from developers about conversions or adding website, whatever they want us to do to help them with the application. So yeah, so take advantage of that if you haven't already done so. And I think that's it for me, Brent. Thank you so much for the time, and appreciate everyone listening.
Well, thanks, Jim.
Okay.
So that's a good tip about 19. It's not that 19 is going away. It's just that it won't be upgraded anymore, or bug fixes. That's
Correct.
right. So it's no more hot fixes, nightly builds, or any of that kind of stuff, right?
That's correct.
Right. So it's a good time to get on the latest version V20, and you know, I'll second that. It's very it makes certainly developing 4D a lot easier when you stay at least close with the R versions, so that you can really understand all of the new features as they come out, and sort of stay in the flow of the direction of where the platform is going, and what the new features are used for, and so yeah, the R versions has been a real game changer for doing development in 4D over the years.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Jim. And let's see. As Jim mentioned, a great place to see what's coming out in the R versions is the 4D blog, which recently has had specifically some important articles about Codely Studio for 4D, and what's new in 4D 20, not V20, 4D 20 R4. And what specifically in R4 is a feature that applies to Codely. So there's Codely support of variadic functions, which is a fancy way to say the ellipses that were added for having a variable number of parameters for methods. And so that's now supported. The reset, there's a standard action for resetting a web application page. The data table got the double click event. So they're continuing to round out the offering, and as they do with 4D general, to continue to put out great features in Codely that specifically apply to Codely. Also, they added a progress bar that automatically appears as you're hitting the REST server in the background, so that it's more obvious to the user that there's something going on. Also, default image for null data stores, so you can see that perhaps you need to add a data store to a particular component. Also, component updates for the text area and slider, and several other UI Studio enhancements. There's a very nice tutorial called that applies to switching from the data table to a matrix to add actions and more functionalities. That's kind of like the equivalent of maybe going from an output form to a list of subforms, where you can have buttons in each row, and a more complicated or a more thorough layout in each line. So that's a neat tutorial to watch and see how one might up the functionality, improve the functionality in their Codely application. There's also a few other recent articles, one being the quick network layer. They're quickly adding functionality to the new network layer. In this case, they've added in R4 the support for automatic updates. That's when a new client version can get pushed out automatically if they're connecting to your server with an older client. And sleep mode is now supported. If you walk away from your computer or go to lunch or let it go to sleep overnight, I think that the length of sleep is configurable, but that is now also supported in the quick network layer. So I think we'll soon be wanting to push in that direction of using the quick network layer. It's more modern and is widely used out there in the wild web. There's another article on creating a client server application with the Build 4D tool. That's another thing that's being rounded out with support for all the extra functionality that we generally use it for, that we use for building applications. In this case, they've added support for generating the built client and server apps with that class and component. And then VDL, Vincent has shared a class for easy handling of your subforms. The more complicated your application gets, the more useful the strategy of using subforms are. And in this case, this class can help you work with a multi-page form that pulls in a variety of subforms, and this class will help to help you manipulate those subforms a little bit easier. Yeah, and also that was all in the 4D blog. Great place for new features and whatnot. Also just for general usage tips and in-depth tech notes, you can go to the 4D knowledge base. In this case, we have an article from Thomas Schlumberger about the 4D info report component, tips and support cases, when you might want to use this component. I know it's really saved us a lot of head scratching at the museum in the past, tracking down memory leaks, memory issues, things that would otherwise be a bit tricky to understand. Here in this screenshot, you can see, the certain memory leak on Windows that's just graphed right there and easy to see that you're quickly losing overhead in your memory overhead for your application, because once it runs out of memory, then you've got issues. Issues like your application not working. So it's always been a great tool. Anytime there's a mystery voodoo happening on your server, that's always my first go-to to say, well, do you have any reports from the 4D info report component? And it was nice to hear that they're actually updating the core. It's been in development for many years, and like all of us developers know, at some point it's kind of good to refactor the code and modernize the fundamentals of these kind of components. And as I mentioned earlier, Tomas will be coming to talk about the component and more in-depth uses and how-tos later on this year. So great. And now let's get over to what we're all waiting for. We've got J. Douglas Cryer here. Dougie already presented about the ULO last August 23, and I gave him a bit of an introduction then. So in an effort not to repeat myself and bore everyone, I'll share a few other facts. Although Dougie is joining us today from Bedford in England, he was actually born in Iserlohn, Germany, Deutschland, just outside of Dortmund. for all of you people following on the maps. His parents were in the British military and eventually moved back to the UK when Dougie was 3 jaar oud, 3 years old. Dougie started Telekinetics Limited in 1995 and has since early 2000s been running the show since then. He loves playing board games such as Catan. Watch out for Dougie and Catan. I don't know if any of you have played that before. That's a real fun game. Wingspan, and he has a large collection of games. I also deeply appreciate that Dougie is a supporter of 4DMethod at the consigliere level. That's a good one. If you're interested in becoming a supporter yourself, I would also deeply appreciate that. Check us out at Patreon. But today, Dougie will show how he is porting his ULO, or his core functionality component, to the world of web applications. So welcome back to the 4DMethod Spotlight, Dougie.
Okay, right. I'm gonna just hack through this the best I can. So I'm gonna start by sharing my screen, and also in the chat, we need to post that link again.
I'll do that.
I've just done it. So
Okay.
so what I've done is I've prepared a little download for you guys, because last time I presented, I thought, well, I didn't really leave them with anything. So I'm actually leaving you with the demo database and the compiled versions of the components, which will work for an hour when you launch the database without, and then they will give you timeout messages. So at least you can look at some of the code in there. So in the zip, we've got the database folder, which you'll recognize. It's a 20.2 version application, so you won't be able to open it and use it. Well, it's a project, so you could open the application, but you won't be. It'll give you errors with the components because they're compiled in 20.2. There's a Postman example, so that you can run your own Postman calls against the REST stack that's built in there.
Nice.
And there's a README that explains just what the application's about and what it basically does and doesn't do. It's not intended to be in any way, shape, or form a complete application. It's basically my playground. So it's got a lot of like kind of general tables, a company contact address structure, a job item, but with very few fields, and it's just there for sort of a mock-up. And what we just demonstrated last time was the ULO component, which had all the features. And if you want to see the details on that, there's a link on 4DMethod to go and look at that video, and it takes you through everything. There's been very little added to this component since. We put in a concept of a form with a form, so that we could do things like this, so we could have the detail next to an item.
Dougie, excuse me.
Yes.
Can you check to make sure that you're sharing the screen?
I'm not sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
All right.
I thought I was. Okay.
Oh,
Right, so go back a little bit. The folder contains a database, a Postman example file, which you can import that collection into Postman, and a README text to tell you a little bit about it.
For anyone who's not familiar with Postman, which might be a bit shocking, but it is a wonderful tool for working with APIs. You can write very nice test cases within the Postman application, and it's almost invaluable for these kind of
yeah. So
yeah,
Brent, I'm going to
uses.
show a little bit of that so that people get an idea of what it does as well.
Great.
So this is the database structure. As I said, it's just a loose collection of a bunch of tables. And the interface that I'd previously demonstrated, which is this is the ULO component that allows you to look at listings and do things like next, previous, and save and cancel, and all of these things like show subset, all of these features. I won't go into much detail. We put in a concept of a form with the listings since the presentation so that we can do things like this and go next and navigate through the detail on the same form as the thing rather than double clicking into it and doing it this way. But the main thing I'm showing today is more to do with the web implementation of many of these concepts. So we touched on this at the end of last presentation, but basically what we did, I'm just going to pull up my notes so that I'm going through these points as I go through. Right. So what we did to do this, we started off by implementing a REST stack within 4D. And so rather than go into this right now, I'm going to open up the Postman collection. And this is talking to the same database. And the Postman collection contains just a few examples, a get example, a simple count example, a post for a new contact, and a new contact deletion. So the get example is the most comprehensive. And you can see here, I've switched everything off. If I just send that, it brings me back page 1 with a page count. Have I got something on there? No. Okay, so that's, and I can say I want the page size to be changed. So I can switch these toggles, and this is what Postman's great on. So you can make one REST call, which is a contact REST call, but then you can put lots of parameters in and switch them on and off to see what the effect would be. So I can do that again and say, I only want to bring back these fields. And it just brings back those fields. So I provided this so that you can play with the copy you've got, launch it up, and then see how you, it will help you learn Postman, if nothing else. And here's one that's doing a 4-name search. And I've tried to describe all the different bits down the side here so that you get that. There's some overall documentation in it as well. And when you do these things, it changes the output that comes back.
Just to clarify, for anybody who needs it, this is a custom customly built REST endpoint, REST application, and not specifically using 4D's REST.
That's correct.
REST
yes.
server, right?
Yeah. So this is it's implemented as a component. So within the example you've got, you will have a component. Where do I go back to my example folder? I can't do it. Yes, in the example folder, you'll find that in the components, you've got a thing called TK REST, which is itself a component that then the application uses to do all the heavy lifting with the REST part. And it has callbacks and management things that you can then communicate. So there's a lot of other things you can do, which I'll show you shortly. But I just wanted to highlight the Postman. So I'm not going to go through a lot here, but you can play with this. Obviously, if you do something like add a new contact, it will then have that contact in there. So I can then take that ID, put it in there, change something like their title. And then when I call that again, it will do an update rather than an insert. Oh, it should do. Have I done something wrong? I've done something wrong because I haven't passed a comma in my JSON. So now it's done an update on that record rather than an insert to then change his job title to director. So you can play with the database, and then you can also then say, well, okay, I want to actually delete that contact now. So I'll take that ID again. I'll put it in the delete one, and I'll go boom, and I'll go send, and that is now deleted. So that's basically simple example collection in Postman to play with the REST stack that you are. Obviously, I'm pointing it at, when you look at the examples, there are some variables. There's one variable, which is pointing at the stack. There's no authentication implemented in this database. So it's completely wide open. It's you could build your own in there, but obviously I've left it so it just works out. There's one user, and it basically authenticates that user directly and allows you to use it on that basis. There's no password to get into the database, and it just does everything out of the box. So I'm now going to show you the application that we built and the feature set that we've actually got on here. So if we go into the contact listing here, we've got show all, and we can say highlight a few and show subset, same as the ULO. We can say omit subset. We can do a query, and here we've got, I think, have I got saved one? People with surname of Jones. So I've got there, and I can run the query, or I could create a new line for it. I could say, or I could say Kelly. So Jones or Kelly. And run that, and I've got one Kelly and a bunch of Joneses. So that's the query editor, which is basically fairly powerful. You can see it's got brackets, so you can play with the brackets and have bracketed searches. You can save and load queries. Queries are saved as your queries, so that's part of the structure in the database. And you can delete queries as well. So I'm not going to save that because I've already saved it, but you'll notice here we've also got tabs. And what we've done there is we've created tabs by saying, in this particular instance, this is a query this is a tab that's created based on using a custom query with people with a surname Smith, the query that we already saved. So we can link that to a tab, so we can have a persistent link to that query and just run it without having to go into the query, because it's a query we want to run every day. Now, obviously, these examples are really numpty examples, but you get the idea that you can basically create a query and then link it to a tab. Another type of tab, which I can't show in here because I don't have any, would be something where this is our support base, which is our active system for logging and managing support tickets and change requests within our organization. But here you can see that I've got a lookup that's based on a tab that's based on a lookup list that's using a field and then saying, I want to choose this lookup value to actually bring that back. So it's a different type of application. We're using a lookup list, and obviously there's a whole way of within admin of defining lookup lists and then saying what's in those lookup lists and what field is that lookup list actually mapped to. Okay. Going back to
really nice interface.
Going back to contiguity, there are 3 ways that I can serve this. So I'll go on to views and relate in a moment. There are 3 ways I can serve this. One, at the moment, this is working on a, I've done from the actual Angular application running in uncompiled, I've done an ng serve that then is serving the application through Node and then connecting to the database that way. So that's kind of like where so that allows us to then go and develop things, make changes to the interface, and then see them immediately happening in our development environment. Once we've made a distributable, which is what you've got in your web folder, a folder called dist, which contains the entire Angular application. Once we've done that, that's then the second mode of serving, which basically is I'm doing a local host directly to the 4D server website, sorry, the 4D server web server, and then pulling that up. Or obviously, I've also got a copy running on a server based in Maidenhead, the UK, that's got an SSL certificate on it, and it's basically running this as a, you know, a full situation where it's actually pulling the data across the network back into my application on here. But the one you've got is this version, and the one I'm currently demoing on is the local copy that I'm doing through ngserve. When you look at, so I'll come back here, I'll go to the next item, which is views. And views allow us to edit. So this is a view. These columns are the view, and I'm currently in the context table. So I can go edit current view, and I can decide, actually, do you know what? I don't want the title in there. We'll just have the forename, and so I can remove that and then save and close it. And suddenly I've just got the forename and surname. Or I can do, let's put the title back in. Let's put it back where it was. So you can drag these around and put these fields in any order you want. You can change the header or the width as either a percentage or a number of pixels. And you can set the alignment to left, right, center. So there's some, it's not as advanced as ULO, it's on the web, and we're constantly looking at how we can build this feature set up and develop it. The most recent thing we did was more of a structural thing. So things like, so what we were doing is we were creating a project and then we were copying these libraries in as components in, so we were copying and pasting a bunch of stuff. This is the what's it called? Yeah, it's what do you call this application? So this is our directory of the Angular web application. And what we were doing is copying and pasting these components in. But what we've done now is we've done in our Git, we have created a bunch of browse organization, Angular TK library. So we created a library and we created packages, which has greatly increased. It's meant that we can manage the data listing component, which is basically all of that shell that actually shows the data lists. We can create a separate package. Packages are like components, but for Angular. Create a separate package for our data services in TK services, and then a separate one for TK query editor. Now you go, well, why did you separate the query editor from the listing? Well, we wanted to create that separation because we know that with our experience in ULO, we did the same thing, and we're able to use the query editor other places in the application than just in the listing. So later on, we know we want to pull that in and do that. So the packages have allowed us to then, when we want to change to the functionality of the query editor or the way the listings work, we can just edit the package and then re-import it with a simple command, like I think it's, I can't remember the name of the, I always lose those. But basically, we can just re-import it through Node into the project, and it updates in that project so that we don't have to copy and paste changes from one to another. As well as the views, we have a concept, we've moved over the concept of relate. So if we've got a bunch of selected records, we can go relate, and it'll show us the related companies for those contacts. And then from there, I might want to go to the related jobs to those companies. Or if I go back to the contacts where I only had 5, I can relate that to the jobs. And then I've then got that selection of jobs that I can then just loop through. So this is also taking into account, it's all done by order. The whole REST component is written in order. So, which is why you've got things like, you can do you'll see in the REST examples, there's an example of, I think I'm doing a relation like this. So I'm doing I can do a query on contact.company name is equal to COR, and I obviously haven't got any in that database because I cut that database down. But it basically filters on a related table. Did I do anything clever in here? No. Okay. Could have been more clever in the way I'd done those, but you get the idea. What else? So that's pretty much it for the demo. Obviously, when we're creating the actual input screens, there's a lot more detail on the input screens than there is in the listing. And these are leveraging off ORDA again. So if we look at, we inspect this and we go to network and we go next record, we can see there that we're making, we've called the contact and we've got related fields within the REST call, which we're then displaying as dot notation data inside here. So you'll notice this is a kind of a slightly annoying part at the moment where it's constantly making these polls. And that's to do with our current implementation of, so when you've got a view, you can export a view. Now, when we first implemented this export view, we immediately exported the data straight out and then popped it as a download on the form. Okay, but what we realized was that wasn't going to be really very good in a thread safe application. So what we implemented instead is we implemented it as part of our is this not working because let's try this on. Let's try that again on the web server, on the main server.
It's impressive to see how well you've been able to model the web application after your your 4D client.
I don't know why that did not export it. The idea is that what it should have done was it should have exported it in the background, unless I've got a trace in there. Look at that. So it's gone into the REST export view and it's traced. So that's why it didn't show up. That's why it wasn't. So basically, I needed to remove that trace. So guys, if you're running it on your thing, there'll be a trace in there. Okay, so what that should do now is it should update. I may have to do that again and just take the trace out and do the thing again. Right, it hasn't shown up. Oh, it has. Here we go. It's shown up right now. So the idea is it does that process at the server end. When it's done the export, and that might have been actually quite a large export anyway, which is why it took a little while. And of course, you don't want to be waiting for that when you're in preemptive mode and everything else like that. It just destroys the whole point. So that's exported that data. Obviously, it was a smaller selection, and it's thrown it into my my example, and yeah, it's sent it to me. I don't know why. Which one am I on? Let me try that again in case it mixed up something. So I'm going to go views, export view, boom, and just see what that does in a moment. But what we've done today, but didn't make it for this, is we've re-implemented this whole notifications thing, because that's what's creating those little, when I showed you in the inspector, all those little calls that it's making is the thing saying, have I got any notifications? Have I got any notifications? So what we've done now today is we've implemented the notifications as a WebSocket. So it basically, and if anybody wants to come to not this week's, but next week's 4D happy hour, I will show off that implementation then. But it just wasn't ready for. We literally started writing it today, and it's not ready because I haven't tested it fully yet. But by doing it as a WebSocket, it means that we don't have the problem that we have with the notification running all the time and saying, have I got any notifications?
Yeah, the WebSockets are such a nice functionality for that kind of requirement.
I wouldn't be surprised if that export now takes a little while because there's 108,570 records. But I don't have to worry about that because eventually it will show up in there and it will show what it's doing. Right, so I've now talked for probably about 30 minutes. And I've shown a general overview of the application. These are the views that are saved so that they can actually be edited in the background and represented. This is the lookup management, which I haven't implemented in here, and I showed you in the other one. And these are the listings that I've currently got implemented, which are, so I've very much showed you everything there is within those tools. Does anybody have any questions, or shall I move on to show you a little bit of code?
No question, just compliment that you know, it's very impressive how you were able to port the whole functionality over to the web application environment, and it looks great, and yeah, the whole idea of splitting up the different components and the different Angular packages looks like a very successful strategy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'll just show you a little bit of the Angular application. So if I look at, I won't look at detail screens. I'll look at primarily I'll focus on the listing screen. So the listing screen is basically, that's what's in the HTML of the listing screen to generate that contact list, because it's literally calling a component that we built, a package that we built, and then included in there. And then the actual active parts of that listing that's all of the callbacks that are needed for that particular listing. There is one other bit I didn't show you, which is in, did I put it in products? I put it in jobs. So in jobs, we put in if I highlight those 3 jobs, we've got a callback action here that allows us to build an action and then say mark as delivered. Okay, so what that does is it goes and looks at the highlighted records and it should mark them as delivered. Yep, so it's marked those extra records as delivered and brought back the selection. So that in the application, in the Angular application, that starts with too many windows, guys. Right. We did that on jobs. So in the job listing components, you'll notice there's this extra bit. So this, the component already looks for actions that have been passed to the toolbar. The actions are initiated within the database. So if I go to our application and I have oh dear, shouldn't have done that one. I can't remember how, but basically we've got this post data of job set delivered, and job set delivered is in our API post method, and it's running the REST post job delivered. So that's receiving an object with all the marked products and literally looping through and marking them as delivered with nothing more than, it's very simple. It's just passing it the current date. Okay, so we could have put a dialogue up to say set the date for delivery and done that, but we just chose to do a very simple example of a method that's actually then called from the web. I just can't remember off the top of my head where I instantiate those lookup lists. What was the markers delivered? Okay, so if I do a search for so I've got a method here. So misc get grid actions. So here I can actually set up by table all of the actions that need to appear in that action menu. And then the front end will pick those up and then add them to the list of actions that are done. So if I, for instance, did this, called it alt markers delivered, still going to run the same method, but on the front end, I should now have two options.
Nice.
So, and this is important because it's not just, you can't just write the REST component as a component and not expect to need some kind of interaction with the database. So there are a number of hooks and preferences, and we've also got right at the start of the whole thing, we have an init REST method where we can specify things that we want to control within the application. So for instance, we're setting up and saying we want to only, this one we're just saying allow all the methods, all of the tables to be accessed, because I don't care. It's a demo database, and we're passing that collection as the set table definition. We are specifying required properties. So every one of my tables has a field called ID, which I want to be the primary key, and I want to always appear back in any REST call. So even when I'm running a REST call from here, and I'm saying I only want title, forename, surname as the fields, it's still going to bring back ID, because that's a mandatory field that I've specified in my definition. I can set the default page size. So if I don't specify a page size in my calls, then it will default to that. I can set a maximum page size so people don't call. So if somebody says, I want 100,000 records at a time, trying to cripple the server, it will actually only deliver a page maximum of 1,000. So, and then we've also got this calculate cost, which you would have seen in the Postman call, where we're returning the cost, some calculated cost data, which is looking at it's milliseconds for the time it took to do the query and the order by, if there's no order by in this. But if I check that on and I do that, that's going to give me, that's the cost in milliseconds for that call. The data is a kind of more abstract value based on the number of records that comes back, and the total is just those figures added up. So it's a kind of like, you might go, it's not very useful, but it gives you an indication, and you can omit that information coming back in the get calls by setting this to false. Obviously, I'd have to rerun that. But if I do that and I then go back to my Postman, I'm hoping that will, yep, it will now omit that data from the REST response that comes back. So cost is really one of those things that if you're building something and it's more public, you might want to do some kind of throttling where you're monitoring the cost, they're getting informed of the cost, and you can say, well, you've overstepped the cost for this hour or minute or whatever so it's not prescriptive. You can use that however you want or not use it at all, but it just gives you an indicative way of doing it. And it'd be interesting if somebody's got any other equations that they would they would use for that sort of thing.
And this is a very nice example of how you've built the API separately from exactly everything running the web page. It can be used completely independently from the app, as you see in the Postman examples, and which means that you could extend the API to other environments like mobile apps or any place else that makes sense to connect from.
Yeah. So we've also got this is an example of a hook back in. So we've got this method called TK set host method. So in this instance, we know that in TK REST there's a method called relate count, and there's a method called relate. Now these work to give you these figures. Okay, so they work in partnership, and so this method here is simply, depending on the table, we can give back and we can say, and all we're doing is we're saying, give me the length of the relation from company to jobs, the relation from company to contacts. And because we're doing that in here, that then shows that pop-up and says, what's the relation? So you can build in, you can do the relate within the application to say, which ones do you want to show a relate for? And the other sort of partner method is when the callback comes back and says, well, I've chosen that relate, and then what does that then give me? It gives me back the records in my selection and the table back to say, I'm giving you back the sort data relationship. So it gives you back all the jobs for that contact. Based on the parameter that's come in, which is the source data selection. Now, There are some more advanced features which are a little bit more difficult to demonstrate. But if I go into the inspector, I go to contacts and I go to network, you'll notice that there's this concept of a select token. And that select token is how we create how we create some context in a session, so that we're not always, so that we know when we go away, we go in here and we go, okay, so I go show subset, and then I go to companies and I go to products and I go to address and I come back to here. I haven't lost that selection because I've stored the token, so I don't have to reperform the search in, and the session variable within the 4D web server will be cognizant of that token and be able to bring that selection back. So it's a way of creating a bit of binding. So the rest that can be used just as a literally disconnected thing, but if you want to use it as a within a contextual mode, you would have to get down and dirty with the tokens. And of course, all of this Angular application is geared around managing those tokens and using them in the most effective way. Okay, I think unless there's more questions, I'm finished my presentation. So if anyone has questions, because I didn't want to run over too much, I've done about 40 to 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah, no, this has been very a very powerful demo of what can be done by building your own REST endpoints in a 4D application. I always recommend one way or another get an API for your application. It just it's the way of the world these days. You consume other people's APIs, and it enables a wider possibilities for integration of your application, and then seeing the nice way that you've been able to it's not solely reliant, your API isn't entirely reliant on things like relation names or table names. All of that is obfuscated, and so that you can have total flexibility with how you're building your API and what things are called, and that end of things. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I don't see any in
The
the
export finally finished, by the way.
ah,
So there's I mean, it was probably finished a little while ago, but there's the resulting spreadsheet with 108,572 rows.
nice. And that was all running in the background, and then the socket sent the notification when it was done.
No, it's not running with sockets yet. It will be. It will
Oh,
be.
okay.
It will be. No, this currently is doing that polling all the time and saying, have I
Okay.
got any notifications? And
Gotcha.
it's just annoying when I look at the inspector. So I figured, well, we have to get rid of that. So it's been rewritten today. I'll be able to demo it, not this week because I'm away, but next following Friday at 4D happy hour if Kirk allows, of course.
Well, that ought to also
You're always allowed, Dougie. Always.
I'd like to just do a shout out to a colleague of mine from back in the early 80s, Andy Llewellyn. Andrew Llewellyn taught me. He used to write. He was the first person one of the first people in the UK to use 4D, and he taught me a lot about 4D. And I think he's doing some work in it again after many years of absence, and he's on today. So yeah, thought I'd just give a shout out to him.
Well, does anyone else have any other questions at the moment? Any comments or anything for Dougie before we switch over here? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in the meantime. But yeah, so that's in general, like I said, it's very impressive how you were able to get the same functionality, even just within that query editor. It's something to see how the web functionality was able to provide the same same interface, mostly the same interface anyways as what you see in the 4D client. Did you find any limitations specifically to speak of that just really you had to work around? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, could I do one final share because I'd forgotten where this was.
Sure.
Right. So in the postman collection thing, I'd forgotten that there's actually, as well as these other bits, I'll just switch these off at the moment. There's actually an optional body. So this, if you use the body, this is actually an example of the structure for the query that's implemented. So if you were building your own front-end application, you could then use this query it looks very much like you'd expect a 4D query to be. It's got attributes, field, and this particular one, it's got a field from a related table, which is the name. And it's then finding, so then I have to specify an attribute, which I didn't have to do when the field was just a field. But when the field is actually a relation, I have to just declare an attribute. And so this is an example of it actually doing a query sent in the body of the request for the get. Now, a lot of people will say you can't use gets with a body. You can. It's just that a lot of applications won't. There's a way of doing it with a post as well, so that you can actually do it, but you have to pass a query parameter. I just thought I'd forgotten that bit, so I'll just stop sharing now. But that's again in the Postman collection, so you can look at that.
Nice. Does that offer any additional flexibility as far as you're concerned, or is it just another way of doing it?
Well, a lot of the use of our API is external. So although
Right.
I was demonstrating it in for our use in an Angular application, a lot of people use it externally just as a REST API. So
Yeah.
when they want to pull something complex out, sticking all the query statements in a URL is just really
Yeah.
difficult. You can't bracket. It's difficult to bracket. It starts to look really kludgy. It starts to get really big, and so we felt it's much better to have a more structured approach to querying. We weren't going to implement GraphQL because mostly it's over people's heads. So we just implemented a very simple 4D-like query object that can then be used within the body of either a query or a get or a post with a query parameter.
That's nice that you have the both ways of calling it available. Yeah, so this is something that at some point anyways, people could pay you to use and adapt to their own data structures and uses.
Yep. It's one of the reasons for giving the application away is mostly I'm looking for people to help me to help them implement web solutions. But I have considered we've now got a licensing on both components, so I have considered it. It's just whether or not there's no money in selling components for 4D. So it's probably more likely I'll be doing it in conjunction. I have a couple of clients that are already asking me to do bits and pieces on the web, and that's the general direction.
Right. Yeah, no, that's you know, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in getting that just that web interface up and running, and that really puts you very far along so that you can build your own custom functionalities within that framework. So, do you have any ideas of price for this sort of setup, or is it,
As I said, I haven't really thought about selling the components as such.
yeah,
But if I'm doing work with people, then we'd give a license to use it with that piece of work, um, and then go from there. But if somebody wants to offer me money, I'm not going to turn it down. But you know,
yeah, that's wise. Yeah,
but often when you sell something like that, the the it becomes a support chore, and it
right,
might be better if I just sold the source code. I don't know. I don't know where I'm at on that, but
right. Okay.
um,
Well, great.
hopefully, and
Yeah.
the other thing is people might look at it and go, yeah, I can do that, and that's fine too. And I've given away the database that calls it all, so people can get a better idea of how it might all hang together if they wanted to attempt to write something themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's there's a lot of great concepts in there one way or another. And certainly it's neat to see how the Angular application was able to you know be structured in a similar way to a 4D application in a way to work with your custom API.
Yep.
Okay, anybody have any other comments, questions, shout outs for Dougie? Otherwise, we'll kick over to the wrap up. Thanks, Dougie. Thanks again for another great presentation. I mean, this has
Thank you
been,
for giving me the opportunity.
yeah. We do have one question from Michael. Using Angular, you just need to use 4D web server, right?
Yeah, that most of that example was run just 40 web servers running. Obviously, depending on your security, depending on what you need, where you need to do things, you could set up a completely different web server just running the Angular application, and then it talks to the 4D database. So you're not tied, but if you're doing something simple, why have another thing in the way?
Right.
Oh, actually, that was a very good. That's a very. I did have one other point, and just on that, if I could just share very briefly.
Sure.
One thing which 4D is brilliant at is getting a really good SSL cert. So that contiguity application that's running on the web, I ran this against it earlier. I never understood who can ever get 100 on these two bars. I don't think it's possible, but you'll get an A plus, which when you compare to that's my business banking, they only get an A. My personal bank gets an A plus. But for some reason, probably legacy applications, 4D can only get an A, but this is a 4D application serving this, and it's giving us an A plus rating for our STL certificate. So until that changes, I'm going to keep using 4D as the web server.
Well, great. That's again, thank you so much for sharing your work and showing off everything you've done with ULO and continue to do on the porting it to the web. And just a reminder for everybody, Doug, you'll be back not this Friday, but next Friday. So to see how he's using sockets for the notifications. Sockets are pretty cool once you start finding uses for them. So that'll be a fun thing to check out. Yep. So thanks everybody. Any other questions, discussion? You can find a dedicated post to this meeting on the 4D forum. discuss 4D and or reach out to 4DMethod with any feedback. It's always appreciated and necessary to keep these things having value. And if you have gotten value from 4DMethod over the years, one way or another, great way to show it is to support us on Patreon. So thanks everybody, and thanks Dougie, and thanks to everyone at 4D for helping out with all the information and whatnot, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Thanks, Dougie.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
All right.